Please help me welcome Jesse Kalberer.
How about now? Okay, thanks, Daryl. Haven't had to do a presentation like this in about 20 years, so bear with me. If you can't hear me, if I go too fast, just yell. Any questions during the presentation, please ask. You might forget them by the time you get to the end if you're like me. Like Daryl said, my name's Jesse Kalberer, my wife's Susan. We have 3 children, Conrad, Isabel, and Carson. We farm near Hazelton, and we live about halfway between Hazelton and Bismarck. My wife goes to Bismarck every day. I go to Hazelton every day. Our farm was established, the original farmstead, in 1883 by my grandpa's grandpa. I'm 5th generation. My brother does most of the grain farming. I do the ranching, just enough farmland to graze, produce feed, and I do get to graze some of his residue when he lets me. We'll go through some of this, kind of how I got started. 2 winters ago, I kind of started thinking about this, and I was getting a little frustrated with how much work we were putting into this and what we were getting out of it, and knew we couldn't last doing the things we'd done. Knew we had to start changing things, and I started thinking about some articles I read and people I'd talked to. I knew Kenny Miller's son-in-law and had heard him talk about some of the stuff Kenny'd been doing, so we went to see Kenny, and I came back with a Stockman Grass Farmer magazine and more information than I could digest. But I just kept digging, read Alan Savory's book, joined this coalition, and started making some plans. I still have a lot to learn. It's quite a process. It's a lot of outside the box of what we were brought up with. So I won't tell you I know everything. And when Trish asked me to do this, I said, I don't know if I'm the guy to tell people what to do. And she said, well, don't, just tell your story. So I'm here to kind of tell you what we're doing and why we did it. I don't know if all of it's right or wrong. I hope we're headed down the right path, and I'm just trying to keep on learning. What we've been doing, I got together with Chad Meyer last winter and said, hey, look, I want to do a bunch of cross fencing. I want to build some infrastructure. I want to do this and that. And Chad Meyer sat down and kind of started finding some funding sources for me and working with me on what we wanted to do. He's with the Fish and Wildlife Service, so he worked a lot with the Natural Resources Trust, Ducks Unlimited for funding. And these were some of the partners we had. And I talk about grazing improvements through partnering. If we didn't have these partners, a lot of this stuff I wouldn't have been able to do, or it would have taken me 10 years to do it financially. So I'm very grateful to those partners, and without them, it'd be really hard to do. NRCS was another one. We didn't do anything with NRCS this year, but we have in the past. And then, of course, the landowners that are allowing me to do these improvements on their land are another partner we have. And, of course, the Grazing Lands Coalition. With Trish, Kenny Miller, Becky Phillips, and many of the other members that we've learned stuff from. So after kind of deciding on some of the things we wanted to do, we kind of came up with some objectives and improvements. These were the main things we wanted to improve on. Improving our grasses and pastures, extending our grazing season, incorporating cover crops, moving our calving season back, and planting some fields to native. So I'll kind of go through each of them individually and give you a little background, a little bit of what we did. For improving grass and pastures, we started, I think it was 2017, with NRCS, installing a solar well system on a well that we didn't have power to. We ran about 2 miles of shallow pipeline, added some stock tanks, a holding tank, stuff like that. We already had, I think, 7 or 8 cells in that pasture. We just needed to get water to them so that the cattle didn't have to walk a half mile or 3/4 of a mile to get to the yard for water. Prior to that, 2015, we'd built some dams. We had a couple of washed out dams that we had to rebuild every couple of years. It just weren't constructed right. Chad with Fish and Wildlife Service had helped me with them. We'd improved them. And he asked me then, do you want to start doing some cross fencing? I went, I don't know. Seems like a lot of work. I don't know how to do it. Let's just wait. So this year when I came back to him and said, hey, let's start doing some cross fencing, he said, well, it's about time. Anyway, this year we did about 72,000 feet of electric cross fence, and we went from 22 cells to 59 cells. In our 2 largest pastures, we went from 9 to 36. And then we also interseeded some native mix on 27 acres of tame grass. I planted that field to grass about 4 or 5 years ago with just a couple of wheat grasses, and it gets tall and stocky and the cattle won't eat it, so we just needed more variety to it. We needed to rotate through it better, and hopefully this will take and help solve that problem, bring a little more diversity to it. So I guess most of what we've done there to improve grass and pasture we did with the water and fence improvements. This was my grazing chart for the pasture. We split into 23 paddocks. Last winter when we did this, I had intended to go through each paddock or each cell twice. The way the summer turned out, it didn't really allow me to do that. We went through all of them once, and I think 3 of them a second time that we'd grazed early and short. We started out trying to get through them twice and doing some fast moves, and when it got dry, we slowed down our moves to try to prolong the grazing and get through them all. So we did only get through them once. This was the biggest parcel, I guess you'd call it, that we divided up this summer and did improvements on. We started out with 5 or 4 actually, 4 different cells. It's about 1,000 acres total, 1,040 I think. And after we got done with all of our cross fences and water improvements, we ended up with 24, looks like 24 cells. And that was that grazing chart that I just showed you that we put together to go through all of these. Here was just a picture of the cattle on the first day. We moved them into one of them cells way on the west side. Obviously pretty happy to be in there. You can see there's a fence there on the left-hand side, the top left corner. On the back side of that fence, that's completely rested land. That hasn't been grazed in about 15, 17 years, something like that. So you can kind of see the diversity we're going for there and what we've been able to do with rotating around. On all them cells, one of the other partners we had was Becky Phillips. She works with the Grazing Lands Coalition. I don't think Becky's here today. I haven't seen her, but Becky came out and did some monitoring for us. She had came out in March and drove around the pastures with me, and we marked a spot in each paddock or each cell to monitor. And she came out anytime I would move cattle. She would come out and take pictures and monitor each site, which was pretty educational for me. It's a little over my pay grade on everything she did, but if you wanted more information about how to do proper monitoring, she's a great resource for it. Yeah, this was one of the starting points. We went out and put points in each paddock and took pictures and kind of made a baseline. And then as we moved through them, she would come out and monitor the conditions, record what we had there. This was a pre-grazing picture, and this was a picture she took right after I moved cattle. The cell on the right, we just grazed. The one on the left, we hadn't grazed yet. So she took them pictures to kind of show a contrast there. And then she did some soil cores and tested for organic matter, carbon content, and so on and so forth. Again, a little bit above my pay grade, but it was interesting to see all the things she did. So that was just one of the tests she had done, kind of to give me the information on what is there and a baseline of what I'm looking for. I'd really like to do this in a lot more areas, but I'm not really to that point yet. I think it's interesting. I think it's good information to have, especially to start a baseline and see what we're doing right or wrong. But like I said, we're not quite there yet. Here was another one of our larger pastures where we started with 5 different cells. The little triangle diamond shape in the middle there is the main yard. That was the only place we had water to begin with. So everything kind of got alleyways to get up there to drink. What you can't see from this is that from down at that yard up to them yellow and red areas is about a 200-foot elevation change. So, and then down and to the right is another 200-foot elevation change. So there was a lot of trailing to get in and out of that yard too. So out here we kind of started with that solar well system. That was the Nrcs helped me with that in I think 2017 or 2016. We had a well back there that had no power, so when we did use it, which was seldom, we had to run a generator on it. So we partnered with NRCS through the EQIP program, put a solar well system, and a bunch of pipelines. That well, you don't have a pointer, do you? No? Okay. That's all right. I'll try to explain my way through it. The bottom center, there's a red dot. If you go straight down from that, at the bottom of the pasture is where that solar well system is. So we went straight north with it to the corner of the orange pasture and headed to the northwest along that blue dotted line to take water up to where it says existing water tank, them 2 top red dots. We added them. They weren't existing when NRCS come. Them were where we ran the pipeline to so we could get water up to them top cells. And then this summer, all the blue cross lines, we added fence lines. We added our electric cross fence too. So I think we started with, 5 paddocks there and ended with 13. We still have a ways to go out here. I'd like to run a few more pipelines and split several of them pastures again. It's a little more challenging with the terrain that's there to run cross fences. The terrain and the deer kind of make it hard, but we'll get there eventually. I went single wire. Yeah, I went single wire, high tensile, with fiberglass composite posts we got from Ken Cove. And yeah, we kept it pretty simple. The cows seem to respect it. Our cows have been around it for years, so they know that it's there and they know not to touch it. And how everybody will build a fence a little differently, but I keep ours pretty low, just to keep the calves where they belong to. I've found that our cows, even if it's low, won't go over it unless they're really pressured. Once they know it's there, even trying to lay the fence on the ground and make them walk over, it's impossible. Ours just won't do it. So there's a picture of the fence right there, just a single wire. That was the last cross fence we put up this summer. I sent that picture to Chad, and he said, "You killed the dog?" I'm like, yeah, the dog and me and 2 kids. But it felt good. It felt good to get done with that. We talked about interseeding. We took that 27 acres. There's about 100 acres of farmland there that I planted to grass. We kind of used 27 acres as an experiment and interseeded a native blend to it. Before we did, we grazed it down pretty hard to try to get a good seed bed for that new grass, and that's kind of what it looked like there right before I seeded it. If I go back here, that pink crosshatched area up there is what we seeded to a native prairie blend. The whole right side of that, you can kind of tell, used to be a field. That'll be next, and the far top left corner will be after that if this is successful. One of the other objectives we had was to extend our grazing season. We all know how expensive it is to make hay and feed hay, so we wanted to make our grazing season as long as possible. It's something we tried to do to a point in years past, but I'm trying to push the limit a little bit further every year as I can. We stockpiled grass and pastures closer to our farm where we had shelter belts in case of weather or anything. We installed 2 more winter tanks with the help of our partners, and we're probably going to do another winter tank next year. What we usually do in the fall, all the summer grazing pastures are anywhere from 5 to 15 miles from home. Still makes me a little nervous to leave cows that far from home come winter, so we try to use them pastures in the summertime. Come fall, we bring the cattle home, wean the calves, and turn the cows back out on our fall winter pastures. We keep about 300, 400 acres of grass close to the farm that we can graze, and then try to incorporate a couple hundred acres of cover crops close to the farm that we can graze, and any crop residue, if there's any corn stalks or anything that are nearby, we'll try to graze that up in the fall and winter. So this was one of the winter tanks we put in. We just had an open tank there before, and it obviously would freeze, so every day we had to go over there. It's about 2 miles from the farm. Every day you had to go over there, chop water, make sure everything was good. This really kind of took a load off. I set up a game camera there that would send pictures to my phone and pointed at the water and put an orange ball in the water so I could see if there was water in it. It cut down my daily trips to every 3 days, every 4 days to go over and check on the cattle. The question is, how would I build the tank? I didn't actually build the tank. There's a guy in Linton that builds these. It's a big uke tire, a big construction tire up in the top. It's just he takes the inside of the tire, flips it over, and screws it back on, and then puts a cover on it. So it's insulated on the top. There's about a 2-inch layer of insulation on that cover. There's a well right there. Yep. So it comes straight out of the well. That pipe over the top of the fence goes right into the water. Yeah. Yes, electric float for the well. It's I don't know how to explain it. It just hangs in there, and when it comes up, it shuts it off. Yep. Oh, perfect. Right there. Okay, thank you. This kind of shows an overview of where we've got everything at here. The farm is actually a little bit to the east here yet. Actually, you can see it. Right there is our main farm. And it's only about 60 acres, so there's not a lot of room there. I think I have a close-up view of it. Yeah, there's a close-up view of it. There's not a lot of room there to keep cattle over the winter, so we try to spread them out over the winter and just use this for calving. Even at calving, to have all them cows on a 60-acre parcel, it gets pretty sloppy if we get a bad year, which is one of the reasons we moved calving back, to try to move them out of the yard and not calve there. So this kind of shows an overview of what we've got going. The farm right down there on the right, where we talked about winter water. If I can find it here. Yeah, that blue dot there is that winter water tank we were just looking at. And right here is another winter water tank we put in. So in the fall, when we turn the cows back out, they usually start up here. We've got a fall pasture right here and a field here that we'd like this year will go into a cover crop. This field and this field get alternated in cover crops for fall grazing. So we kind of start up here and move them through the cover crops in this pasture, and there's another fall pasture here. Kind of move them through all this stuff away from the farm earlier in the fall. And then as the winter progresses, we try to get them a little closer to home and a little closer to shelter. I rent this farm here from a cousin of mine. So as winter comes, we bring them in here, graze this, and then we'll winter them. When I have to start feeding, which will be next week, we'll start feeding them here, and then bring them a little closer to home, feed them here for a little while, and then bring them home right before calving to give them any shots they need, give them a little TLC for a little bit before they calve, and then they will go back over to this farm and calve on grass in this cell and these cells. I guess is the plan. This is the first year we've done it that way, so that's what I'm looking towards. The pastures we talked about earlier that we split into 24 paddocks, that's back here. So you can see we've got about a 5-mile trail to get back there. This kind of just shows a little bit more of a close-up of what I was talking about for fall and winter grazing. The red is kind of where we start out with our fall grazing and early winter grazing. And then the green is where I intend to do calving this spring. This is that quarter just to the west of the home place. We added a winter water tank here. I wintered cattle up here. We've wintered cattle up here. There's a shelter belt, and we've been wintering cattle here for probably about 15 years. That was an open tank before, so that was a daily chop the ice, maybe twice a day chop the ice chore. So it's really nice to have that winter water there. We also planted this little 5-acre field to native grass. We dormant seeded that this fall, hoping we get a good catch on that. We get some rain this spring. And then the 2 fields on either side of this, we fenced with our partners. We fenced them fields off this year, and we have been putting cover crops in either one or both of these, and we'll continue to do so for more fall and winter grazing. I don't know if anybody has any experience with forage corn. I've talked to a couple guys that have done it and really like it. I would like to try that there this year and see how that works. Like I said, cover crops. We just started doing cover crops in 2019 on that 43 acres that I had just pointed at. Last year was exceptional with the moisture we had. The cover crops were, chin high, and the cows couldn't walk through them, and you couldn't drive a four-wheeler through them. This year was a little bit different. They did take, but they didn't go far. They got about a foot tall. We got a frost, and it took out the sorghum and millet. And we did get some grazing. We got about 2 weeks worth of grazing out of them, but not what we'd expected. And some of that, I think, of course, was the weather. We didn't get the rain we needed, and we planted it a little bit late. We hayed our oats and then went back into it with a cover crop, and we were about 2 weeks late on haying the oats, so that put us back a little bit. But we do want to keep going with that. I think there's a lot of potential in the cover crops from what I've seen with Kenny doing and what we just heard from Gabe. I want to do a lot more of it, and we're going to try to do more of a rye rotation where I can get the rye off earlier or graze it earlier and then get the cover crop in a little bit earlier. Maybe a little bit of different variety in the cover crop so we get a little better turnout for fall grazing on it. One of the other things we talked about was calving later. We'd calved anywhere from beginning mid-February to beginning of March, depending on the year. My dad had always done it at the beginning of March. He'd start the heifers 10th of March and the cows a week later. About 4 or 5 years ago, I moved it up a couple of weeks, and we started the middle of February, and it was not good. Yeah, I think a lot of you have been through that. I didn't enjoy it. It was hard work. It cost a lot of money, and we just went, why are we doing this? So we moved from March now to end of April calving is where we'll be at this year. We stockpiled grass in 7 paddocks for calving. We didn't graze it at all in 2020. It'll be just a strictly calving pastures for this spring. Main goals of that are reduce feeding and increase grazing days and calve on grass. Hopefully we'll have healthier cattle and reduce some costs. And this is one of the pastures that we split up and stockpiled for calving. So hopefully we'll be pretty happy with that. I remember Jerry saying a couple of years ago that was the best decision he ever made, was to change calving dates. So as far as native plantings, we talked about that a little bit earlier. We planted 50 acres of cropland to a native blend. There are smaller fields closer to the farms, closer to shelter belts, not real conducive to farming in the first place and way more convenient for grass where we need it. So we dormant seeded that this fall, and hopefully we'll get a good catch, like I said. We also planted a bunch of trees in 2015, about 3.5 miles to surround some of them areas where we intend to do some future winter grazing and to restore some shelter belts. And it looks like I talk way too fast. So kind of summary, our short-term goals were to keep learning, lengthen our grazing season, and calve later. Long-term goals, we want to improve our grasslands, plants, and soils, improve our cropland soil, and make the farm and ranch sustainable for future generations. Again, without all the partners we had financially and educationally, I don't know that I could have done any of this. So we're very grateful to our partners, all those that mentored me and taught me new things, and I encourage any of you to use those resources and use those partners. Just the knowledge base for me was tremendous, and I really appreciated that. So I guess that's about all I have. If anybody has any more questions or comments or anything.
Here, hold on. I'll get you the mic so we can. Are you sure? Okay. Speak up.
Earlier, your slides were talking about your organic matter in the soil at 4.2%. Is that starting or is that current? Or what change has there been?
That's current. That's my baseline. I don't know what change there's been. That's what's there right now. That's what she took this summer.
Well, it's a good starting point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Other questions? Oh,
I just have a question probably for the group in general. How do the cooperators here or producers here, as well as yourself, feel about the partners helping you, but then some of our cooperators are very hesitant to have certain partners because of the fear of, do they have a hidden agenda to come in and take, or have control or something over the land or whatever in the end. And so I fight that probably a lot, that fear from cooperators of, is the World Wildlife Federation going to come in, or the Nature Conservancy, whoever it is, do they have a hidden agenda?
I didn't find that to be the case. I think their agenda is the same as ours, to improve the grasslands, to improve the environment, and a lot of them are kind of looking for the same results we are, a better, more diverse grass population. And I kind of had the same thoughts right away, like, what am I going to have to do? And we read through the contracts, asked questions. I didn't feel like I was being tied up at all, but maybe some people do. Any other comments on that, anybody?
you know me, I don't like to comment.
Could you flip back to your winter water tank picture? I saw you had the hose that went up over the top. Does that drain both directions then, or how do you prevent any freezing? Do you just not have a backflow valve in?
Yes, it just drains back both ways. There's no backflow in the, there's a weep hole about 10 feet down in the well. So anything that's in that hose will, when the well shuts off, will weep back down below the freeze point.
Any other questions for Jesse? Okay.
Do I intend on summering there? Usually no. Occasionally we'll give it a quick graze in the spring, but all summer, no, I don't have any intentions of that at this point. Yeah. I don't know if it would keep up in the summer, in the heat of the summer. I kind of doubt it. It's about 1,000-gallon capacity, give or take, so it is a pretty good sized tank. It's actually buried in the ground about 1.5 feet from what you see, so it's a little deeper than it looks. But midsummer watering on a couple hundred cows, I doubt it.
Jesse, we had a question in the back. What are you powering your energizers with? Or is it a solar or 110 or?
I pretty much went away from all the solars this year. I found a way to get 110 to all of them, either from a well point like this or from a yard or whatever. A couple of places I had to run a half a mile of high tensile wire just to get to where I wanted the fence energized from a power point. But I've found they're so much more reliable and they've got so much more power. For me, it was worth that extra $50 spool of wire to go put the wire in and make it work.
I had another question that, have you thought about using, I see you're taking a forage crop and then putting your cover crop. Any thought on using full season covers, like planting them in early June and then just letting them do their thing? And
Yeah, a lot of thought in it. I just don't quite have it all figured out yet, Daryl.
no,
I think it's something that may happen, and depending on what kind of moisture we get this year, we've got about 250 acres of wheat planned to follow with rye. Half of that may actually come out of wheat and go right into an early season cover crop like you're talking to take some stress off of the pastures, give us a little more grazing.
Sure. Anyone else have a question? I had another thought, and I was going to talk when Gabe was here about this, but he said, and this is so true, and again, this goes back to my work at the Minokan farm for the soil district, because we get in huge amounts, or lots and lots of groups, but the regenerative ag is a thinking person's game, right? And so the human nature of things, and we find this all the time with the people that we meet, and it's even myself and others, human nature is to simplify things. And we see yourself and others, lots of others, thankfully, that, they're going to the thinking man's game. Is there anything that you can elaborate? I know this is a deep question, but why did you change? We ask this people all the time, or, even the doubters, that come and they're a bit skeptical, but, did you just wake up one morning and say,
No, I didn't just wake up one morning. It's still it's a process. We'd been doing things for generations the same way. So I guess what got me thinking more than anything was the money. This isn't profitable, and it's hard work, and why are we doing it? And why would my kids or their kids want to do it either? So that was probably the first thing that got me thinking. To change your whole thought process is hard, and it's still ongoing. It's nice to come here and be challenged by other people of what you can do and what's been working for them and what could work for us. But yeah, it's an evolution. Like I said, I'm still learning, and I hope I can keep learning, but I think the hardest part about it was changing your conventional way of thought and doing a lot more thinking rather than spending 15 hours on the tractor all day every week, to sit down and spend 15 hours a week in front of a computer or a book or in front of your finances to really think about what's going to work. It's a lot easier to go do the work than it is to sit down and think about that stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great answer. Thank you for that. Appreciate that.